It's going to be a really, really great discussion. And how we're going to do it is we're going to give each of our panelists maybe about 7 to 10 minutes just to talk a little bit about their work and what they've been up to. After that, if any questions of mine come to mind, I will ask, and then we will open the floor up for any questions from our audience here. We are going to, for the sake of our Zoom audience, ask anyone with a question to make their way up to the microphone here so that we make sure to capture it. Just because I'm a little bit lazier than our fantastic legal director, and I don't want to have to repeat your question. So just make your way up to the mic here. And before we get into the official presentation, I'm just going to ask each of them when I call on their name just to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll start with Bibi Naniki. After that, we'll go to the Prime Minister, and then we'll go to Ms. Tony. So, Bibi, would you mind just taking a moment to introduce yourself to our audience?
Good morning, or at least it's morning here. I know it's afternoon there. Daka Nabori, Naniki Reyes Ocasio, Daka Guara Borikén, Boricua. I am a member of the First Nations peoples of Borikén, known collectively as Taíno. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. All right. Next, if we could have the Honorable Prime Minister Louis George Tin of the State of the African Diaspora to give us greetings. Good morning. Good to see you, Prime Minister.
Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, my name is Dr. Louis George Tin, and I'm the Prime Minister of the State of the African Diaspora, a state that was launched 5 years ago during the summit of the African Union. And our objective is to reinforce Africa through the diaspora and the diaspora through Africa. Thank you for your invitation.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And Ms. Kimberly Tony.
Okay. Natasau is Kimberly Tony, Ninapo Hasanamisko Nipmuck, Moni Nokishkawaduank. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kimberly Tony. I am a member of the Hasanamisko Band of Nipmuck. I'm happy to be with you here today. I also work as the inaugural coordinating curator of Native and Indigenous collections at the John Carter Brown Library, which is an independent research library on Brown University's campus. And I split my time between there and also Brown University Special Collections Library, so also working for the university.
Thank you very much. Round of applause for our panelists and for their distinguished backgrounds. So Bibi Naniki, we're going to turn the microphone and the stage over to you for you to share about some of the work that you've been doing around repatriating ancestral artifacts and remains.
Okay, so Palermo, do you have my PowerPoint up?
Yes, he does.
Okay, I can't see it, that's why I'm asking. All right, so before I start, I really want to acknowledge the traditional and spiritual physical custodians of the unceded lands of the Pokanoket and the Narragansett people called Providence, Rhode Island. We want to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. When we talk about repatriation, it's important to know that we're not just talking about the return of ancestral remains, cultural heritage, and knowledge to the lands of origin. We're also talking about rematriation, the restoration of right relationships, the reunion of the land with its original caretakers, and way of life rooted in the reverence of Mother Earth and all our relations. It is about true acts of decolonization that will usher in and transform our collective future by dismantling colonialism. Through repatriation and rematriation, we gather our shattered and scattered cultural heritage and legacy. It is the return of sacred sites, landscapes, language, restoration, protection of ecosystems, biodiversity, traditions, values, and beliefs. It is the return of a sense of community and connection to our past, which plays a role in shaping our individual and collective identity. It is a source of pride and inspiration. It is all related. It is finding the balance between conservation of the past with the need to be resilient, adapt to changing circumstances, and meet the needs of past, present, and future generations. I want to share a 1-minute clip. Palermo, if you would just click on that. You should be in slide 4. I'm sorry, I haven't told you to shift. Yeah, if you would just click there and then stop it at 1 minute, about 1.7 minutes. Can you click there or?
Yeah, he's working it right now. Bibi.
Okay, thank you.
History books have tried to erase us.
It has been taught so much that American Indians are dead and gone or vanished.
This is a study about a culture and a group of people that are still alive. Integral pieces of our values, our life ways, who we are being ripped away, thrown on a shelf.
It's like having a relative in jail or in prison. I've often used the word lost, but then I didn't feel comfortable using that word because we never lost it. It was stolen from us.
Why do you have them? And what are you doing with them? And what is the purpose? And how did you get them?
It's heartbreaking to watch your ancestors being extracted.
It feels disrespectful. It feels hurtful. It feels like a violation.
It creates this imbalance on the land, in our families, in our communities.
In essence, we're professional mourners.
We're just trying to make ourselves whole again, and repatriation gives us that opportunity to do.
So Native people are seen as the relics of the past.
Thank you. I wanted to share that because I thought the expressions particular video goes to the very heart of what repatriation is about. And so today, while we celebrate the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, 2 declarations on the rights of Indigenous peoples, the UN Declaration and the OAS Declaration, and we're into the 4th international decade for the eradication of colonialism next. None of these protections apply to the Indigenous peoples of unincorporated territories, insular areas of the United States, or the oldest colony in the world, Boriken, aka colonial Puerto Rico, the lands of the Boricua First Nations people known collectively as Taíno. Although the UN declared that the colonialism is over, that is not the living experience of the Indigenous peoples of Boriken. Next. I put Areito there because I wanted to share a story of an event, a very important and major event that happened in 2005. It was our first experience with repatriation of ancestral remains. We were celebrating the first UCTP Congress on our lands in Puerto Rico and in Borikén, and Cucuya, grandmother Cucuya, came to that meeting and announced that Sedetra in Jayuya, which is like about 25 minutes away from our lands in Orocovis, said that we could repatriate a set of ancestral remains that they had placed in their museum in a very disrespectful way. It had been placed under the stairs of the museum and encased within a plexiglass, and she was just kind of put on the floor. We were, of course, very impacted by that image. And we worked with the director for a while, and at least, we began with telling her the importance of covering, telling her the importance of respect, and we were able to get it covered. And Cucuya continued her advocacy and continued the pressure and expressing, that this is our sovereign right. And she was successful. And on that day in 2005, in that Congress, we gathered members of the Congress, and we went to Hayuya because we had to do all of the work. We had to dig the space where we would be placing the ancestor. We had to mix the cement, which was a requirement to place on top so that no one else could get in there and dig her up again. And at the same time, while some of us were doing that work, others of us were in the museum preparing our ancestor to be returned. Excuse me, I get a little emotional still talking about it, and being laid to rest peacefully in her land again and by her people. And so it's against, right, this backdrop of laws and protections that really don't apply to us and are denied to us, and then acts of just sovereignty that then we partnered with established relationships that we had with Wendy Tweeter, who is a NAPRA specialist and anthropologist, with Isabel Collazo, which is a Boricua archaeologist who does not remove ancestors or disturb ancestral resting places when she does studies on archaeological sites. She also involves actively and has trained community members with the knowledge about these sites. And so she's a very special person. And both of these wonderful women encouraged me to establish a relationship with Maria Montenegro, who's an assistant professor at UC Irvine in California. And she is the project manager for the California Mukutu Hub project. As a result, Mukutu now has offered us the use of their platform so we can share our digital cultural heritage in a culturally relevant and ethically minded way in their platform that really fosters relationships of respect and trust next. So while today we celebrate, right? I'm sorry, I'm a little behind here. Okay. Yeah. So with our research and the work that we've been doing, we should be, I guess, on slide 8. Palermo, I'm sorry, I have to tell you to switch. Not being very good. I wanted to share this. Let's be on slide 8. It's okay about the other. I can talk about that later. No, the slide 8. No, you go backwards. No. It's the slide after against this backdrop, and that Mukutu has offered to their space, their platform for us to share our digital cultural heritage. And it has a little clip there of the Mukutu, what Mukutu does for Indigenous peoples and with Indigenous people.
Bibi, do you want Dr. Palermo to play that clip?
Yes, please.
Okay.
It's a short clip also, just like the other one. It's important to share it. They do some pretty amazing work, and their platform really allows the community to participate, to be active creators of the scripts that will go along with the cultural, materials that are on the platform. So can we share that, or?
He's getting it ready right now.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry. I got to be mindful of telling him where we are in the presentation. Thank you, Palermo. Next slide, please. So in preparation to do this work, these amazing women also recommended and encouraged me to take UCLA free courses on the preservation of tribal cultural materials in tribal collections, developing a collections management plan for tribal collections. And we are now doing the exhibitions planning for tribal repositories with a focus on collections care. It's our intent to do whatever it is that we need to do to acquire the skills necessary to be prepared at the right moment and time to repatriate and rematriate our ancestral remains and carry them home and welcome our cultural belongings back to the people. To that end, we're working with Taíno, who is the legal director of the Center for Indigenous Peoples' Rights in Rhode Island, and one of the interns, Jacqueline Panigua. They're assisting us in finalizing our initial cultural policy management and manual, which we trust that will be ready at a good final draft before or by the end of the year. Next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, thank you. No, it is. No, you were right. I'm sorry. In Borikén, we're working with a group of women. Jackie Negron Flores. She's a human rights and indigenous rights activist, teacher, and curriculum development specialist. Emilia Huertas, who's also a human and gender rights activist, translator, agricultural professional, and coordinator. Tanya Lorenzano, human rights and indigenous rights activist. She's knowledge keeper of the Yucca. And myself are currently reviewing some of the digital cultural belongings that are held in the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian actually has a multitude of museums within it, and each of them we're finding out have digital cultural materials that belong to our people. We're happy to announce that we're anticipating that by spring equinox of 2024, in collaboration and with the support of Maria from Mukutu and Pluma Barbara Moreno, who's an indigenous rights activist and sociologist, will be able to provide a community training on the Mukutu content management system for sharing cultural materials, their core functions and tools. These capacity building workshops, we're excited about it, are going to be able to be held in the Lattice Community School, which is a community school that belongs to the community. And it's run collectively. Pluma runs a school collectively with her community. And we're calling it for now, and probably will change. And we're calling it the Boricua First Nations Peoples Archives. That will be part of the Mukutu safekeeping place for indigenous communities to manage and share our digital cultural heritage. Next slide, please. On this journey, we have sought information on all aspects of this work. We've promoted and gained support for the work. We've taken steps towards establishing the relationships necessary for the repatriation and rematriation of digital cultural belongings that may also in the future support and provide momentum to advance towards a repatriation, rematriation of ancestral remains and tangible cultural belongings. There's much work to do in the coming months and years. We're just really laying down the foundation. We welcome and trust and count on the sustained and growing community participation. What follows is just about 3 slides related to some of the materials that we found. This particular collection, and again, they don't name their collections by the peoples, but rather by the collectors and the illegal owners of these materials. But the interesting part, next slide, Palermo, please, is that this photograph is titled Taíno Woman Making Hat at the community of Joyuda Municipality of Cabo Rojo, Puerto Rico. This is in complete contradiction, right, to the U.S. claim of our non-existence as a people and nation. So this will go into a particular file that will establish all of these living and actual archives that demonstrate our continued existence in the island. Next slide. This is another very interesting document. It's it has many pages, I forget exactly, but it's this whole, it's a War Department report on the census of Puerto Rico, because that's what they called it at that time after the US came in 1898, excuse me. So this is their report. The interesting part about this is that at that time, they're reporting that there were only 100 to 6,000 of us on the island, whereas in 1788, Inigo Abad says that our population was thickly populated as a beehive. And so we can see, these ongoing contradictions in how, our people are made invisible and erasure, and, what gives rise to this whole myth of our extinction. And next. This is also what's exciting about the fact that there are actual copies or pictures of cultural materials, tangible, is that with 3D replication, it's possible to replicate some of these cultural belongings and have our exhibits be more interactive, where people can actually engage with these pieces, ancestral pieces, and also they will serve as inspiration for existing potters. I'm a potterer, so I'm excited about this possibility to actually be able to interact with these pieces and have them inspire the work that I do. Next slide. I wanted to have an opportunity to have us remember that it was the First Nation peoples of the Caribbean, known collectively as the Taíno, who first shed blood to defend and fight for the right to self-determination, the very right that we were denied then, and the right that we're continued to be denied today. From the landing of Columbus to that of General Miles, the infamous Indian killer, genocider in the North, the resilience and survivance of our people, the Taíno people, is a testimony to the strength and fortitude of our ancestral teachings, to our traditions and values. And despite 530 years of attempts at assimilation and colonialism, we continue to fight for the right to self-determination. And by virtue of that right, for all Indigenous people to freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. Next slide. We will continue to gather the shattered and scattered cultural belongings of our ancestral heritage and legacy. We resolve to ensure access for all our peoples, elders, communities, present and future generations. We aim to defend, maintain, caretake, and protect ancestral burial sites, sacred sites, and landscapes, remains and funerary cultural belongings from the continual looting, theft, and grave robbing by colonial institutions, archaeologists, research institutions, private collectors, settlers, and other unscrupulous peoples. We strive to eliminate biases, tear down misunderstandings, and build respect, expanding knowledge and sharing it in a respectful, appropriate manner and in accordance with our values. Next slide, please. In taking this first step to repatriate our digital cultural belongings, we exercise our collective sovereign rights as the rightful guardians and caretakers of our tangible and digital cultural materials, our ancestral remains and funerary cultural belongings. In doing so, it's going to guide us to the next step, to carry our ancestors home, gently and lovingly place them back in the womb of Atabe, Earth Mother, so that they can rest in peace. Hangankatu. It is so. Bomatum, Bomatum, we are grateful. In the spirit of our ancestors, let us stand together, support each other in this most important work, advocating for our ancestors, present and future generations. Hangankatu. It is so. Thank you all for joining this event and being here today. It is truly a good day. Thank you.
Round of applause for Bibi Naniki. Please, if you have any questions, please mark them down. We want to make sure to get through all of our presenters, but of course, we want to give time at the end for anyone who has any follow-up questions. At this time, I'd like to turn the microphone and the stage over to Prime Minister Tin. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Excellencies. And I would like to greet the organizers of this meeting and also Queen Windocon, who is the Vice Prime Minister of our state, and also Queen IG, and brothers and sisters. I have to say that I've been particularly moved by what our sisters said. I'm coming from Martinique. I was born in the so-called French West Indies, and the Taíno people were the first inhabitants of this island. Today, there is no Taíno left on this island. It was a perfect genocide. And nobody in France is informed about that. Of course, the government never recognized anything, and the population keeps saying they never organized any genocide in history. Of course, when the genocide is perfect, nobody knows about it. But we are here to speak about it. And I have to say that the indigenous nations of the Americas and the African people deported to the Americas have always been in solidarity. I know that many of my ancestors who were slaves and then became maroons because they could run away from the plantations. The only way they could survive is because they were in solidarity with the native people who taught them how to survive in the jungle, what herb you can use for healing, what you can eat or what you cannot eat. So this collaboration existed in the past, and it is obviously continuing today. So I'm very happy to mention that as a beginning, as an introduction to my speech. So what I'm going to discuss today to present is our campaign on reconquest. I don't even want to say restitution, because restitution means that somebody is going to make a kind of favor to you, and that's not going to happen. What is going to happen is our will to reconquest what belongs to us. Colonization is a matter of robbery. So robbery of land, of lives, of resources, of artifacts, even human remains. Therefore, anti-colonialism is a matter of reconquest of all these things that were stolen from us. So that is why among our campaigns in the state of the African diaspora, we have a huge focus on this topic with the two queens I have mentioned in the room, because that is also part of their portfolio. So let me mention the situation of African artifacts. You need to know that 95% of the cultural heritage of Africa is detained out of Africa. And we made, yes, I think you can see it now. So we created a website to give some examples, only a few examples, out of 1 million artifacts detained out of Africa. So on this website, which is called restitutionmuseum.com, you can have a look, for example, taken from, if you want to identify some artifacts that were taken from Algeria, Angola, Benin, Cameroon, Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, etc., then you can have a look at them. Now, if you want to focus on the people who took these artifacts and you want to see where they are detained in today, then you can have a look. You can have a look at Austria, Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, UK, Netherlands, Switzerland, United States. And of course, United States is in the list because though they never had any colonies, they had a lot of money and many connections with the colonizers. And because the United States understood that prestige goes with colonization, they said, well, we need, of course, we have already colonized this land, but what about Africa? So even if we didn't colonize anything in Africa, we can still buy some artifacts from European countries. And the European people had so many artifacts, even in the caves, they didn't have enough room in their caves. So they were happy to sell them to the United States and many other countries. So in the United States, you will find out more than 100 museums detaining African art, and most of it, of course, was stolen. And you will find them, for example, in Harvard Museum, the Peabody Museum of Harvard. You will find it in Berkeley, the Berkeley Museum. You will find it in most of the prestigious museums of the United States. So it's a matter also, it's an international matter, or a matter between North and South, if you like. So if you want to have a look later on this website, you will have some examples. We have also included other countries beyond, for example, you have India, you will find other examples. And I will be very happy to complete it with more examples coming from the native people of the Americas. So this is the situation, and of course, human remains is also at stake. So I will tell you first what we have done so far. And of course, we have done different things, legal and concrete action. Let me try to share some of the documents I have for you. Here, for example, this is in the Francophone Parliament of Belgium, with our Member of Parliament, Mrs. Robert. So she's one of our MPs in Brussels, and we launched this campaign in Brussels. And at the end of the day, we managed to have a resolution of the Parliament of Brussels. As you can see here, it was on March 2019. So this is the proposal, and it was finally adopted. And it's about restitution of human remains and cultural goods taken from colonization, during colonization, as you can see. So you can see here the names of the MPs who brought that resolution after our lobbying efforts and our diplomatic action. So finally, the resolution was voted, adopted by the Parliament, and now the process is starting. The first artifact was recently restituted to DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. So that's an example of what we have achieved so far. Let me give you some other examples. So this other one is very interesting. You will see it, it's coming from the European Parliament, because our idea was not only to discuss each country after country. We said we need to go to the European Parliament. Now you can see their website. So that's the website of the European Parliament. And this text was adopted a few days after the resolution in Belgium, by the way. So March 26, 2019. So it is a text for the fundamental rights of people of African descent. And initially, it was about racism, but not about colonialism. So they would say, well, racism is wrong against Black people, for example, but they didn't want to mention anything about colonization. And I told them, well, it's because of your racism or the racism of your ancestors that you did colonize Africa. So all of that is connected. So when so many millions of people in Africa were killed, were deported, were massacred, that is called racism. So you couldn't say we are working against racism, but we don't want to do anything against colonialism. It's like saying we have to condemn anti-Semitism, but we don't want to discuss the Shoah. That wouldn't make any sense. So after our lobbying effort again, our diplomatic campaign, they finally understood they had to include topics related to colonization here. So you can see here Article 7 to 9 saying clearly that the European Parliament, I quote, recalls that some member states have taken steps toward meaningful and effective redress for past injustices and crimes against humanity, bearing in mind their lasting impacts in the present against people of African descent. Well, believe me, there are not so many member states that have done anything, but you know. Article 8, the European Parliament call for the EU institution and the remainder of the member states to follow this example, which may include some forms of reparation, such as offering public apologies and the restitution of stolen artifacts to their countries of origin. 9, the European Parliament calls on the member states to declassify their colonial archives. So these are some examples of the legislations we managed to have, for example, in Belgium, in the European Parliament, and of course in France, because I live in France, I had to start at home. Reparation and restitution start at home, and restitution is a part of our global agenda for reparation, obviously. So I'm going to make a study case, if you don't mind, to speak about what we did for Benin in particular. As you may know, in the past, Benin was called Dahomey, and this kingdom became a colony of France in the 19th century. So we started a whole campaign focusing on Benin as an example. Of course, we could have done the same thing for any other country of Africa. So let me share what we did for Benin in particular. And that's the past. And later on, I will be in a position to tell you what we are going to do in the future. So now, still speaking about the past, I think you can see my screen now, hopefully. Yes, it's coming. So we have here a document explaining in a newsletter what we did for Benin. So that's why the document is called Restitution, or rather Reconquest. So I can tell you the end of the campaign. Sorry for the spoiler alert, but yes, we managed to have restitution of these artifacts, the treasure of Abomey, and that's why the president of Benin invited me as a guest of honor to the ceremony. And here you can see on my right side the Minister of Foreign Affairs. You can see also the Minister of Culture, the Ambassador of France, and the experts that were also designated by the French president to work on the topic. So that's the end of the story, but I would like to tell you the whole process. So we started, of course, our campaign by a call that was publicized in the French main newspaper, and I signed it with the former president of Benin, President Soglo. So I went to the media, as you can see, to present and explain what we are asking. Then I went to the country itself to discuss with the king. Unfortunately, that king is now dead, but it was, or it is still in my heart, King Agoli Agbo. And I'm here discussing with him, and he made a very strong statement saying that, yes, he is supporting our request for restitution of a treasure of Abomey that did belong to his ancestors. So here I'm receiving a gift from local organizations. So it's a kind of portrait of a restitution. Then I had to lobby. I'm here in France with President Hollande. And after these lobbying efforts, we managed to convince Mr. Talon, president of Benin, in June 2016. Originally, he was more than skeptical about it, and he recognized it after that. But he said, well, okay, well, I don't believe in what you're saying, but after all, we have nothing to lose. So you are so determined that let's try, let's give a try. That's what he told me. And he even reminded that to me a few years ago after the victory. So I came back another time to Benin 1 year later to discuss more about conservation on different aspects. I'm here with the Minister of Culture. We have here Prince Gezo, who died a few years ago, unfortunately, but he was very instrumental as well in that battle. And then that became a law, and that the document you can see on the left is actually what the government, the decree made by the government asking restitution to France, and they are mentioning, it's probably too small for you to read it, but they say, we are, of course, supporting the campaign that was started by Dr. Taíno, and we need to actually reinforce it, and ourselves, we are asking restitution as well, following this campaign. So, Mr. Macron was elected as a president after President Hollande, and initially he didn't want to hear anything about restitution, as you could expect. And I told him, well, you will discover that it is very difficult to restitute, but probably much more difficult not to restitute. And if you don't want to do it, we're going to court. And he told me, well, Mr. Taíno, you're going to lose your case. I said, well, of course, I will lose at court because the court is probably colonialist, but I will win in the medias. And I can tell you, it will even be the best campaign in my life. I will be seen as a Pan-African hero in every single country of Africa and beyond. So it would perhaps even be better for my own personal communication if I lose at court. And that would be a disaster for your diplomacy. It will be in tatters. Everybody will see that France, the so-called country of human rights, is still a country based on colonization. So that's going to be a very big problem for you. And he told me, well, okay, we don't need, to get crazy. I'm going to make a speech. I have to go to Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso in 2 months, and I'm going to make the speech that you are probably waiting for. I said, okay, so I can suspend the case against you, and let's wait and see. And indeed, when he went to Ouagadougou, he said that he would restitute everything to Benin. So it happened that I met him the year after. And of course, I'm here telling him, well, it's a good start, but it's only a start, So that's the discussion after. Now, the third trip to Benin was my return when the treasures of Abomey were also returned. And I can tell you, from the airport to the palace of the president, you had people chanting and dancing on both sides of the road, as you can see here, with their drums of happiness, pride, and everything. So this is the truck. You can see on the truck restitution of the treasures, the royal treasures of Benin. So we were all very happy. However, that's only a beginning, as I said, because many more artifacts are still remaining in France. So this one, for example, more than 2,000 or 3,000 are still remaining in France. You can imagine the vastitude of our work. So we've got here the picture of the Dagbohunan, the leader of the voodoo tradition, and many of these artifacts should be in his hands. So this is what we have done so far. It's a summary of what we have done so far in terms of restitution. Now, what are we going to do? So this is the next chapter of my presentation. Give me a few seconds. Okay, so let me share the press kit, because on October the 25th, the State of the African Diaspora is going to make a class action for restitution. So I think you can see on the screen, so I'm working on that with our Vice Prime Minister, whom I mentioned earlier, and our Queen Minister of Historical Legacy, Queen IG. So we are organizing this press conference with the State of the African Diaspora and the International Commission for Heritage and Culture. And the idea is very simple. It's a class action. So the principle is there is strength in numbers. Instead of asking restitution or trying to reconquest every single artifact, or even trying to do it for one country and then another one, and then another one. There are 45 countries in Africa, not to mention all the other countries that also need restitution or reconquest of their historical legacy. I said, let us make a class action. So the idea is to say, all of us, we need to say the same thing the same day. And that's, of course, going to work even better. We were successful in Benin. We will be even more successful if many nations come together as one. And this is the principle that we're going to present to the media in a few days. We are expecting dozens of journalists. So we have received so far, I don't know if you can see it, different mandates from countries and nations, nations from Democratic Republic of Congo, nations from Benin, of course, Madagascar, Gabon, Liberia, Uganda, South Africa. I need to add to this document Chad, because the Organization of Traditional Rulers gave us a mandate recently. And of course, we are very happy and honored to be in a position to include FANA, the Federation and of Aboriginous people of the Americas and the different nations, because it is not a matter, it's not an African topic, it's a matter of international justice, and all the peoples that were colonized are very welcome. We're expecting, for example, some kingdoms from India to also be part of this journey. So they said they would send their mandate probably tomorrow or the day after, I hope. So just to explain to you that our idea is, of course, to work in solidarity with India, in solidarity with the native people. And I'm making a call here for whoever wants to join and be part of a push, be part of a victory. Please come. You can either introduce your case yourself, or if you're not ready, we have our lawyers, and you can make a mandate for us to work on your behalf and make sure your artifacts and human remains are returned to your nation. So both are possible. Either you do it yourself with us, or you give us a mandate to do it on your behalf. Both are possible. But to come to the press conference better, if it's possible, I know the time is short, but we already have some nations from North America, native nations, so it's still time. So I call upon all of you to join the movement and the victory. So we have given a few examples. So let's start with DRC. Here we have a mandate from the government. It is signed by the Minister of Culture and Tourism. So he authorizes us to work on his behalf. And I have to say that the class action will be diplomatic first. And then if we don't receive the appropriate answer, which is probably the case, then we will go to court. But probably we won't have to go to court, because if I think of a French example, we threatened him, the president, to go to court. And he said, well, I don't believe you will win. And I told him what you know. So the threat was enough, was sufficient. So it's not bluff. I mean, we have lawyers that are ready to go to court, but probably we do not need to make a whole case and wait for the end of it, because we expect a victory even before the end of the case. But we have a mandate from Congo even to go to court. And here you have some examples of these ill-gotten artifacts that belong to DRC. Here you have a Songyo mask, which is located in the British Museum. You might ask, why is it in the British Museum and not in Brussels, for example? Well, because all these, theft, all these thieves, are working together as a team. So they exchange goods, I mean, human remains, artifacts, and they buy, or sometimes they lend, they are working together as a team. And of course, in our position to resist and reconquest, we also need to work as a team. So that's why I am giving you this example from the British Museum. Here, another very important statue coming also from DRC, but located in the British Museum, which you might not expect originally. This one is even not in Brussels or in UK. This one is located in the Metropolitan Museum of New York. So again, I explained to you why all these artifacts are not only in the former colonial master, but all over the world, at least in the northern countries. Let's say sometimes in Norway, Sweden, perhaps sometimes even Russia, but a lot of them in Western Europe, of course, and the United States. Now, we also have Benin. We also have a mandate from Benin. And I have here, I don't want to be too long, but we have here some examples of spiritual artifacts. So it's a matter not only of arts, it's a matter of spirituality. So that is even more shocking. So again, I don't want to be too long. Benin has more than 3,000 artifacts in France. So I'm just giving you 2 or 3 examples. Of course, it would be impossible to say more. I'm giving these examples, however, because they used to be in a Catholic museum, and now they are located in another one, to say that the Catholic people and the Vatican did steal a lot of artifacts. So they were demonizing the spiritualities of our ancestors, saying this, that's not good at all, give it to me, and they would keep it safe in their own museums. So you can see the hypocrisy. It's not good, but I'm going to take it. And still in the Vatican, you've got the Ethnological Museum, and I have given a mission to our ambassador to the Vatican to work on that. Hopefully, Pope Francis will be more open. I mean, if I have in mind his take about migrations, for example, etc. So we can be rather optimistic as well about their reaction, but we are prepared again for a fight. Madagascar, here we're speaking about human remains in particular. Mr. Kamani is the prince who received the mandate from the royal family. And this royal family is the last family that resisted to colonization. Unfortunately, the king was beheaded, and the head is still, and the human remains are still in France. Of course, we need restitution of all of that. So that's the skull of King Twera's skull. This is our ambassador who is leading the charge. And you can see that he's smiling because he's in contact with his ancestor. But he's not always smiling because he needs his ancestor to be sent back to Madagascar. Now, Gabon, we've received a mandate from ESAP, the organization of the Fang, the Ekang of Gabon. That's the main ethnicity in Gabon. They represent 75 or 80% of the population. And they have, for example, this secret society, the Ngil society. They were in charge of justice, and they had these sacred masks, and these masks are detained, of course, out of Africa, sometimes even sold in auction houses, and we had to fight against them. Recently, we managed to stop one action. So Christie's were trying to sell some of these Ngil masks. So we are coordinating an action to stop the process. So, but now, after stopping this process, the sale, now we need restitution or reconquest, as I say. So this is another Ngil mask, very, very important. The one I'm talking about was supposed to be sold around $4 or $5 million, because the previous one was sold with the same price. So when they say that has no value, well, but they're ready to pay a lot of money to get it. Liberia, we received a mandate from the National Council of Chiefs and Elders of Liberia, thanks to Chief Zanzankawa. So here you can see the cooperation agreement. Article 6 is about restitution, of course. That's another example. That helmet mask, a very precious artifact, is located in the Brooklyn Museum in the United States, again for the same reasons. This one is in the Ethnological Museum of Berlin. And of course, Liberia was never a colony of Germany, but as I told you, there were many exchanges before criminals. We also received a mandate from the Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom. I have to say that we worked as a team. So what I'm speaking about is not my achievement, but the collective achievement of our two queens and myself, plus our ambassadors on the ground, in constant connection with the traditional group. So sometimes the mandate is coming from the traditional leaders, sometimes it's coming from the government, it depends, but both are relevant to have a victory. So Uganda, that's a pottery bowl for milk, located in the UK. And this one is particularly important. It is a stool, a throne stool. And that is very important for the kingdom because it is a symbol of a king. And now it is in the United Kingdom. We also received a mandate from the San and the Khoi nations. You know, the San are the actual name of the people who were in the past designated as the Bushmen, but the Bushmen is of course the colonial name. Their proper name is the San, and the Khoi nation is a very close nations, and both gave us this mandate to operate on their behalf. These are some examples of artifacts detained out of Africa, but that belong to them as well. So I think I can stop here, but you understand the idea, the concept, that's what we're going to do. So at the moment, we are writing the letters to the governments of France, UK, Germany, United States, etc., to tell them we are organizing this press conference. We will announce that we have written to you. We give you 2 months so that you can actually give a proper answer. If we don't receive the answer that we are expecting, we are prepared to go to courts. So that's very simple. This is already what we did in the past for Benin. We did in the past for DRC. Now we are doing it for more countries. And my conclusion is only to refuse any conclusion, because we are opening a debate. We are opening a call for all of you. If you want to join, please, you are welcome. Our ancestors did work in the past in solidarity. Today, we are continuing the same tradition. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. A round of applause for the Prime Minister. And for our last presentation for this panel, we'll turn it over to Ms. Kim Tony.
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here and share this space with you. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the work that I've been doing at Brown University, but first want to kind of position myself and also just talk about how the work in the library kind of relates to the museum and repatriation work that our other panelists have been speaking about. So, and I guess also being mindful of the fact that I am someone who works at a colonial institution that is very complicit in sort of perpetuating harm and dispossession against Native folks. And as someone who works in Rhode Island, I am not here to represent the institution, nor am I here to represent my tribal community, but I'm here as someone who has experienced working at such an institution and who brings with me my identity every day that I go to work. So the position I have is as the first ever curator of Native and Indigenous collections at Brown University, the Special Collections Library, and at the John Carter Brown Library. So I work across both spaces, and I've been at the work for a little over a year now. So the position was created as sort of the library's response to the commitments that it outlined, that the university outlined as part of its land acknowledgement. So there are commitments to Indigenous communities tied to that. And I think the library has taken on a role there by hiring someone to come in my view, disrupt what's been happening at the libraries for the time that Brown and those libraries have existed. So in special collections, I'm surrounded by old and rare books. Brown University Special Collections and Archives houses a very large and broad collection of early and modern rare books. So these are, you know, spanning from colonial period sources to the materials that I'm trying to collect for the library now that engage Indigenous knowledges and agency and voice. So people who are Indigenous people who are producing knowledge, we want to have their materials come into the library and be in conversation with the older historical collections in the library that represent a period of knowledge extraction by non-Native people. At the John Carter Brown Library, the collection there is a little bit different, but it is a library of colonialism. So the library traces its history back as a library to a large amount of book purchases made in 1846 by John Carter Brown, who was a Brown family descendant. And at that time, this privileged person is focusing on collecting books that deal with his idea or this created idea of what Americana is. And at that time, it's basically extracted knowledges from the places that come to be called North America, Mesoamerica, the Caribbean, and South America. The collection there is very hemispheric in scope and includes material in Cannabula, 13th century materials through the cutoff date is about 1826 for materials there in the library. So there's not necessarily room there to think about contemporary materials created by and for Native peoples to include the collection, but the space there that we're trying to create is about how we steward and think about the collections that have been there all this time, how we describe them, how we promote equitable access to them, because a lot of people don't understand or don't know that the libraries, both of them that I work at, are free and open to the public. So anybody, you don't have to be affiliated with Brown, you can come in and look at those materials. So I hope you'll indulge me while I just read a couple bullet points that I outlined for myself. In my role as a curator, I have access to a lot of the documentation, the things that track the histories of land dispossession through the signing of deeds or petitions in the 17th century. I can read printed accounts by settlers of interactions they had with Native folks in the Northeast and indeed globally, or at least in the Western Hemisphere. I can access documents written by Native folks themselves about their own experiences from this time. And I also, through this work, have made a lot of connections to folks who work in museums, where they might house, instead of library, books and manuscripts and correspondences, objects or belongings. So in visiting and consulting with museums on Nipmuc homelands, I see the art and artifacts, the stone tools, the baskets, the mashunash or canoes on display in these places, and understand the ways to access institutional records, acquisitions files, and correspondences related to the provenance of these items when they exist. Libraries, as some of you might know, and museums don't often keep the best records about how they came into possession of cultural belongings, or artifacts. So this also helps me to make distinctions around things that were created and sold through a participation in a market economy. For example, some baskets and some jewelry were made to circulate and sort of Native people sort of participating in a commercial economy. That's not true for all artifacts or all baskets or all jewelry. So being able to sort of track possession through archival materials becomes really important. So I have kind of an example of this in terms of my work with other cultural heritage or colonial institutions. There is a museum in Worcester, Massachusetts, where I commute really far away from for the time being, that has a mashoon or a traditional canoe in its possession. And there's documentation that says that the canoe was extracted by a group of non-Native folks in about 1898. And they removed it from its resting place in the pond without consent from Native folks, Nipmuc folks specifically in this case, who very intentionally put it in the pond. So it was removed in the 1890s to a colonial museum to be stored and sometimes interpreted and viewed by museum goers. And of course, the museum goers are folks who are not typically Native. And the same institution, it turns out, through discussions we had about seeing and viewing the Mashoon and trying to work with them in other capacities, it turns out they hold ancestral remains there. And so through these conversations about other objects in the library, we're now trying to work with them to move through the requirements of NAGPRA that require them to return those remains. But I also want to state, as a Nipmuc person, although I know and have access to information and sort of collections as someone who moved in colonial spaces, there are additional and very real obstacles to access when it comes to discussions about returning or repatriating belongings to my community and others. The Hassan-Misko Band of Nipmuc is state recognized in Massachusetts, but that means we don't have federal recognition. And I just want to be clear too, that when I'm discussing my own identity and positionality, that while federally recognized tribes relate to and are treated by the federal government in certain ways, I don't believe that a lack of federal recognition for my community does anything to discount our political and cultural sovereignty and right to self-determination. So just saying that. So even though the mandates of NAGPRA might say that these cultural organizations are only mandated to speak with federally recognized communities, I don't necessarily believe that NAGPRA is the best way to go about returning materials for all communities for these sort of reasons. Yeah, so I would say like my community and others don't have any less of a right to have stolen objects returned. But it also means in order to relate to a system that prioritizes certain forms of recognition, my community and others have to work with and rely upon sister tribes who are federally recognized to receive returns from those institutions, and they then pass them along to us. We've done work with some Wampanoag folks and Stockbridge, Munsee, Mohegan folks to have remains returned to us. But also we operate on sort of the assumption of morality and ethical obligation for other organizations too, to just return things without having to go through the NAGPRA process. And I'm just gonna kind of keep it short here, but building relationships across institutions, libraries, and museums can really help forward the work of returning our ancestors. I think it's important to have all of these things work together across an ecosystem that moves toward recognizing and validating sovereignty and the return of cultural materials. I think I said this before, but the mandates of NAGPRA and sort of the lack of follow through with NAGPRA across institutions informs the work in community engagement and institutional change that I'm hoping to encourage at the libraries and therefore at other centers, institutions, or partner organizations that are predominantly white and don't have Native folks working there or at the table. I'm hoping that the work at the John Carter Brown Library and the Brown University Library informs other work that's happening at other institutions that have felt, even though we're all on Brown's campus, really siloed away from each other in this work. And NAGPRA is not necessarily the standard because it has historically allowed institutions to be lazy or to delay returns or not return things based on a lack of an ability to identify the cultural group or groups belongings should be returned to. And that again is informed by primary or 17th century documents that do a lot to invisibilize individuality or the individual components of various cultures in the Northeast and across Turtle Island. And that there really is no mechanism for follow through or agency on the behalf of tribal communities. And maybe that's changing, hopefully. So in terms of the work that I'm hoping to forward at the library, at the John Hay Library, which is the Special Collections Library at Brown, we worked to create an inventory of everything archival in that collection. So manuscripts, correspondences, and letters back and forth between folks historically. Anything that might fall into the category of relating to Native and Indigenous communities. And the collection is pretty global in scope, although weak in some areas. But we're using that inventory to make a first pass through to determine whether or not there are materials in the collection that would contain culturally sensitive information. And so when we do come across things that might contain culturally sensitive information, we are instituting a research moratorium on those things so that no one is allowed to come and research those things until myself or other people who are allied in the work have reached out to the tribal communities to have discussions with those communities about how Brown might best steward or continue to steward those collections. And we're being very expansive in thinking about what that would even mean. In some cases, that might mean return. We've also made updates to the deed of gift and donor questionnaire forms. So I feel like a real important part of this work is not only encouraging discussion, community engagement, and dialogue, but also encouraging institutional change. And that means changing policies. That means changing workflows, hiring people who have expertise in these things. So the research moratorium kind of goes hand in hand with updating gift forms so that not only the people who might want to donate things to the library, but also the people who are working at the library and wanting to accept donations have a piece of paper that is asking them to have a discussion with people about how they got something, about whether or not culturally sensitive information might exist across the materials that they're planning to donate. There's also information in the questionnaire or the deed of gift about who might maintain intellectual copyright over those items and whether that should be an individual or a tribal nation. And the idea that we might think about those things and have conversations, and that these documents are actually living documents, and that they're forwarding a conversation between a potential donor and the institution that centers agency and self-determination. And another sort of, I guess, two other things that we've been working on at a library level is having staff training and cultural humility, again, sort of working toward institutional change, changing how we talk about things. I like to refer to objects in the library not as objects, but as belongings, to sort of center the relationship that people have with them, that they continue to have with them, even if their access to those things is mitigated through the colonial systems and the institutions that perpetuate those gatekeeping systems. And then also increasing access or equitable access to collections. And that is with inviting folks to come in and visit me at the library and talk about things that are there, but also in working with people who are cataloging things and describing things and figuring out ways to move outside of sort of the mandates of library language and how you talk about things, to use preferred terms for people, things like that. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there, just to say that I'm working to hopefully change things at an institutional level, but the work that's happening in libraries and archives certainly informs the knowledge that we can bring to the table when we're having discussions with museums about belongings that are in the collection that they need to be returning, and also that libraries are often accessible to folks, and these institutional libraries hold often the paper trail about how things got there, and can really empower our voice when we want to engage with institutions and systems that are not necessarily set up to prioritize community wants or needs.
Round of applause for Ms. Tony, please. Thank you very much for that presentation. We're going to take questions, but I just want to give a couple of quick remarks. There's two elements that I kind of heard as across the board in 3 presentations we heard today. First is that these items aren't just items. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Aren't just items. There are nations, there are peoples that these items have relationships with and to. And they're not just something that was stuck in a museum or something for people to look at. They mean things to people. And I heard Bibi Naniki kind of get emotional about the remains being returned. That's someone's ancestor. Just imagine having your ancestor underneath the stairs somewhere. So that's the first thing, centering the fact that there's relationships with these quote unquote items that go beyond Euro-colonial concepts of what belongs to who, when we took this and all of that sort of stuff. But then secondly, the shared themes, because you have indigenous folks from the Caribbean, indigenous folks from Africa and indigenous folks from here in quote unquote New England. And we're all having the same issues and the same similar experiences and the same struggles. So really hoping that in this discussion that we're having this weekend, we're really understanding that these are shared narratives, shared experiences, and shared work that we all need to do. So if I could just round of applause for our three presenters again for their work. And just want to open it up for a few minutes for any questions or comments that anyone from the audience may have. Yes, and if you, sir, if you would come up to the mic, please.
Okay, good day. I came up to ask this questions because I noticed I'm here, I'm a local artist, practitioner, and a curator. I went to a show at Brown not too long ago that had to do with the Taíno collections. And had to do with, curating, and it was like 3 or 4 different curators, none of which, had any background or cultural connection to the Taíno. They presented, they had someone speak virtually, but I went to the professor and to the actual over curators that were administering the sub curators. And I went and I introduced myself. I told them my name is Joel Rosario Tapia, Kasiketure Guatainukai. I represent Sibukubai Montaigne tribe, substantial presence of people here. We're interested in seeing the collections. We're also interested in having access and having this conversation about not just repatriation, but just basic access, because there's such a substantial population of us. I wrote in, I was given a card, introduced myself, got given a number. I called the number, left several messages, wrote an email, never received any return or anything, even though, the individuals seemed on the surface to be very open to a conversation about this. I came to ask you because you're in the same department, or well, you're doing the job, the same job. So I'm coming to ask a question about that in that way, to how, because I couldn't have any conversations with them about it, and you're in a similar department. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way I can establish a dialogue with you or with anyone. Who would you recommend that we have this conversation with over there? Because I've attempted and I've done it on my own. I've got cards, and none of these people, after you meet them, they don't call you back. They're not interested in really that conversation, and they say they are. What's the,
I think this is valid frustration that people feel. So I know a little bit about that exhibition because it happened through the Hafenreffer Museum, I believe. And so I made a comment earlier about how departments and centers at Brown seem to be siloed in sort of the work and the level of engagement that they're doing. And obviously this is something that I hope will change over time. But again, I work in the libraries, I don't work for the Hafenreffer. So there's communications that we aren't having, which is unfortunate because it leads to these frustrations when people have projects that address that there are stakeholders in the community, but there's not communication happening. So yes, I do know that there have been some folks hired at a community outreach center to try to so there is work. Several people across departments, for lack of a better term, in Brown see that this is an issue in terms of lack of engagement or different levels of engagement or desire to engage communication. So we're trying to funnel a lot of the outreach that happens through one place, because also what happens is that the same people get multiple requests for things and other folks don't get any requests at all. And it's it becomes this echo chamber too, which again is just sort of perpetuating these systems that we are living in. So the Swearer Center at Brown University, Swearer, but also the name of it. They're doing some work to sort of focus on community engagement. funneled through a particular, it's instead of requests coming from multiple places or people sort of being mired in this confusion about like, who do I ask for what? Because I'm at the library, but I'm not related to the Native American Indigenous Studies Initiative. I'm not related to the Natives at Brown group. I'm not related to the Half and Refer, right? But it's confusing for me as someone who's moved around. So I would recommend reaching out to the SWIR Center, but I can also give you my card to just follow up a little bit about that, but also that I guess acknowledging too in the space that I'm limited, right, in terms of my agency because my job is in a very specific place. And unfortunately, it ends up being difficult to navigate as someone who's trying to do good work in one space when other communities are not engaged.
Very much. 1 second. Bibi Naniki has a comment she wants to make from our Zoom panel. And then anyone, Randy, if you want to come up to the mic next. Bibi, please.
Okay. Yeah, it's just that the mic that our sister is talking through is very low, so I'm having a real hard time hearing her, and I really want to hear what she has to say. And so I don't know if she has to bring that mic closer to her or the volume has to be raised because I have my phone on like top and I can't hear her. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we did a little bit of engineering over there, Dr. So,
Thank you.
very good. Randy, did you have a question, sir?
Noka tribal elder for the Narragansett tribe and representing the consulting. I don't know if I have a question, but certainly wanted to thank the Center for thought-provoking panel today, this morning, this afternoon. You know, it's disturbing. Oh, I'm sorry. Also, for those here and for those Zoom land, welcome to the Aboriginal territory, the Narragansett Nation, unceded Aboriginal territory. We've had many comments today, and it's disturbing and hurts the heart. You know that what we go through as Indigenous people, Aboriginal people, you know, the homelands of my people here. It's you know, what we've experienced, what we listen to from the elders, and I hope I'm not too long, so forgive me, but what we've lived with and what we've experienced and what we know what the ancestors went through. And you hear from the Guatemalan people and their issues and the Taíno people and their issues. And we're not alone. You know, we don't have the only thing happening to us. It's still happening to our ancestors. What happened to our ancestors still happening in present day. Still going to affect every generation. And it's disturbing to know that, you know, the country that we live in, what America has done and continues to do, and what other countries do to the Aboriginal or ancestors of the Aboriginal, you know, the artifacts that are buried in museums one way or another. You know, they're part of our people. They're part of our culture. They don't need to, they shouldn't be on shelves in museums, and I'm not taking this out on you when I say that. They shouldn't be on shelves. They shouldn't be in boxes. They should be back with our people. And if they need to be repatriated into the lands or whatever, then that's what they need to be. Or the artifacts themselves. It's what our people should be experiencing. And our young ones still to come up with, this is part of who and what you are. It shouldn't be taken over by anyone else and laying somewhere in someone else's boxes of museums, shelves. You hear the Prime Minister share about a skull, a head, you know, laying in, I forget where it was, in France somewhere. How dare these people do that? You know, and they do it without any conscience or regret or moral obligation. And they can still live that way. And you know, we heard earlier the manifest destiny or doctrine of theft, you know, in different ways that we can bring about what we experience and how this country evolved in other countries. And what was done, again, can't lose sight of the fact. You know, I appreciate this opportunity because sometimes you don't know what's going on elsewhere, but you know what happened to your own. And so you come to gatherings like this and you come to find out, damn, but yet they still do it and they don't care. So yes, the message that we can carry together one way or another, we may not agree with everything that I might say or others might say, but we're descendants of the Aboriginal people or wherever we came from or wherever, the indigenous people, where you may have came from. If we don't do it, then no one else is going to do it for us. So this is a great opportunity that the Center provided here. And, for those listening, for those that are part of it, don't lose out on the opportunity, because we're the representatives now for the next 7 generations. And our ancestors went through a lot worse than what we're going through right now. A lot worse. Everywhere you go out there, the blood of the Narragansetts, everywhere you go out there. So we can't lose out on that opportunity. So whatever you're getting out of this today, don't let it stay here as we go home. And thank you. I hope.
We have our next comment. Yeah, we got one last comment, and then just before we go, I'll give another shameless plug. We need more Indigenous lawyers. So young folks, old folks out there,
I would like to
if
say
you're
perhaps
thinking about
one
another
thing.
graduate degree or something, don't do that. Go get a JD. We need more lawyers out here to push this work forward. Prime Minister, did you have a comment? And then we'll turn it.
Yes, yes, thank you very much. I wanted to thank our brother who took the floor. And again, I wanted to insist, because some people, even in the chat, ask me, what can we do? And the question, of course, is important, like making exhibition, like making demonstration, press releases and everything. But what is more important is not what can we do, but how can we do it? And how can we do it is really together. Colonialism is like a fortress. If you want to reconquest the fortress and you have some soldiers, if you send one soldier, he will be killed. If you send the day after another one, he will be killed. The day after you send another one, he will be killed. Why would you do that? If you have an army, you have to take all your army together and go against the fortress, So that's why it's important to do things, but in a coordinated manner. So if we look isolated in the eyes of our, enemies, or whatever the name you want to call them, well, it will be rather useless. So you can do a lot of things, but what is important is to do it in a coordinated manner. So if they see that people in Africa are fighting with people in India, with people in the United States, etc., they will say, oh my God, something is happening. So if Liberia goes alone to see UK will say, oh, who are these people? If perhaps Zimbabwe goes alone, they will say, oh, they're all black, we don't care. If they say, they see, for example, perhaps Malawi, they will say, well, we don't even know where this country is located. But if all of them come together, they will say, oh my God, this is half of the Commonwealth already. And we don't want to lose the Commonwealth. So that would be the same, of course, with the native people. So I think what is important here, what I want to stress out, is the need to do it together. I'm not saying that everybody needs to come together. That's not going to happen. Not everybody, but at least some people to have a beginning of a coordination. That is the key for success. So when we did it with Benin, we were already 2. There was Benin, the one side, and my organization on the other side. Now we are more numerous. So I would encourage people to do things, but keeping in mind this very simple strategy to do it with an alliance. And FANA, of course, is already an alliance. The state of the African diaspora is an ally. So that's why we can do things together, and this is how we can succeed.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Violetta, you will be our last comment for this afternoon. And once again, many thanks, Katapatush, to our 3 panelists this afternoon for this fantastic discussion, also for our panelists earlier today, giving a legal perspective. And as the Prime Minister said, we should be doing this together. We all have our individual fights, and we don't want to take anything away from our individual experiences. But when we bring those fights together, it's a greater chance for victory for all of us. So Violetta, please.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, panelists, for the information that you gave us today and your time. I have 2 questions. One for Bibi Naniki. My name is Violetta Aikaya Nanichi of the Sibuko-Bayamon tribe. And my question is are there any systems in place open to the diaspora of Taínos who are just awakening to the call to repatriate? That is part of the collective, or that is not just based, because I feel like I get questions like I'm a songwriter, and I wrote a song in Taíno as I've been learning it, but I get questions all the time, and I sometimes I feel from random people that are, whether they're from the Dominican Republic or Boriken or Jamaica, Haiti, but they sometimes I don't know how to direct them, you know. So I don't know. My question is, do the elders have anything in place that can be that people can be referred to? Yeah, how would we get access to that? Can she hear me? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think that, thank you for the question, and Tainoti, good to hear you, and I can't see you, but I can certainly hear you. There are many ways that people can contact us. I mean, the Kane has an email, Boyo Atabe has email, other organizations and Yucayekes have, you know, ways in which people can communicate. The Center, you know, for Indigenous Peoples' Rights also has a way for people to communicate and learn a little bit more. So I think it's really, you know, as we said, in our work, the work that we're promoting in Puerto Rico and in the island and in Borikén, we welcome the participation and really are we would welcome the help and the assistance and participation of the young people. You know, we're getting I'm kind of like, you know, we say I have my foot in two worlds at this point. I'm going up in age, and so it's important that you all, you know, pick up the torch and carry it forward. So I believe that my email is made available on the information provided at the by the event.
Yeah.
Or you know, we can. I think Palermo can get it to you in some kind of way.
Okay, thank you so much.
I don't know if that did that to answer your question.
That does. Thank you so much. Such an honor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
My next question is for Prime Minister Luis Georges. I'm not sure if you I heard some of the countries there that you have that you guys are advocating for to get artifacts back. But I do know of that I didn't hear in the list, but there is also Austria, Vienna, Austria. There's a museum called excuse my pronunciation, Vervolkerkunde in Vienna, and they have 3 artifacts of Taíno artifacts of semis made of cotton, and not sure where 2 of them. One of them is from the Dominican Republic, and the other 2 are from, I'm not sure where, it didn't say, but it's that museum, and also Luigi Pigioni National Museum in Italy also has artifacts. And I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that, but I don't know, I would like to, I don't know, somehow collaborate with you all and to see if we can get something.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for your question. I didn't know specifically that there were Taíno artifacts in this museum, but I'm not surprised because what was taken has to be somewhere in Europe. And of course, we would be very happy to work with the Taíno nation. So that would be very simple. I will share my contact in the chat if you like, and you can contact me and we can discuss. I don't know if it's going to be possible before the 25th. It's a bit short, but still, we can still work on it, and you can join the movement. In fact, we just need to have a mandate from the Taíno nation, or they can make their own case, but with us. And when we go to the different countries in Europe, and we will have to go everywhere, we can say, okay, now we are in Austria, for example, we have some artifacts from the Taíno nation, from Congo, all of them, etc., are making a case against you. Now, do you want to go to court, or do you want to restitute them without too much trouble for you? So the answer is yes, yes, and yes. So I will share my contacts in the chat, And please do not hesitate to contact me at any time. And as I said, I feel very close to the Taíno community because I was born in a country where they were erased and genocide. So we have a kind of, as a Black person, as a people of African descent, I was deported there. I mean, against my will. My ancestors were deported in this country after the genocide. However, in Martinique, we have a mission as Black people to support the memory of the people who were there before. Thank God there are still Taínos in many other countries, but yes, it is a duty for us, not only a pleasure, but a duty for us to support your nation. Thank you very much.
Round of applause for all of our panelists again. That'll bring us to the end of our discussion this afternoon.